Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the third annual Australian Islamic Schooling Conference, a focus on pedagogy. Friend, allow me to start by acknowledging that the land we meet on today is the traditional lands of the Ghana people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with this country. We also acknowledge the Ghana people as the traditional custodians of the Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Ghana people today as they were in the past. At this stage, allow me to invite a dear colleague and a friend and a brother, an elder of the Ghana people, our respected Professor Lester Irabina Rigni, to do the welcome to country. Thank you.
On behalf of the Ghana people, I welcome you to our country. It's a beautiful country, and this is my mother's country, actually, and grandmother's country. For those who don't know where my father's country is, it's your peninsula. So if you just go down to the beach and swim for about 3 weeks, you'll hit your peninsula, and that's my father's country. But it's an honour to be here today. But I wanted to say to you that this country that you're sitting on is quite old, and Aboriginal people are the oldest people on the planet, and that before my mother and father got together, generations before they got together, this coastline was joined to your peninsula. That's how long we've been here. We've got a story about how a kangaroo dug onto the ground and made this body of water in between the two lands, between your peninsula and Adelaide. So we have stories about what the landscape looked like before the water was here. So that's how long we've been here, how old we've been here. But Australia is home to all people within its borders, and all the children who live within Australia have citizenship rights. And so it's coincidence, I guess, maybe not coincidence, that this conference is held during NAIDOC Week, the National Aboriginal Islanders Day Conference Committee Week, which is my busiest week. And the theme for that is because of her we can. And I just wanted to say, bring revolutionary praise to all the women in the room. And just to say, because of you we can. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my amazing mother, who was the first female Aboriginal school principal in Australia, Dr. Alice Rigby. There was no urban Aboriginal schools until she built one. And now there's 36 schools across the country just like hers. And I want to say to you today, as women, you are powerful, and I respect you, and Australia deserves you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Always inspiring words. Always love to listen to Professor Rigni. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, allow me at the outset to acknowledge the presence of the following people. The Honourable John Gardner, Minister of Education, Mr. Nigel Ralph, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor and President of the University of South Australia, Professor Stephen Dobson, the Head of School and Dean of the School of Education, University of South Australia, Dr. Fawzan, the Vice Dean for Partnership, the State Islamic University, Jakarta, Indonesia, Dr. Ahmed Sufyan, the Vice Dean for Administration, the State Islamic University, Jakarta, Indonesia. Our keynote speaker, Professor Lester Irabina Rigni, Professor of Education, University of South Australia. Another keynote speaker, Professor Rob Hutton, Professor of Education Justice, University of South Australia. Keynote speaker, Dr. Nadeem Memon, Senior Research Fellow at SITE at University of South Australia. Dr. Deborah Price, the Executive Member at the Australian Curriculum Studies Association and the President. Ms. Ainur Semisil, President, Islamic Schools Association of Australia. Mr. Ahmed Zreiqa, President, Islamic Society of South Australia. all the principals, teachers and imams of the many schools represented here from all around Australia, and our international guests and partners from Brunei, Canada, Indonesia, Oman, Qatar, Sri Lanka, United Arab Emirates, UK and the USA. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this conference. May I at this stage also introduce the Honourable Minister John Gardner, the Minister of Education. John Gardner has represented the seat of Rialta in Adelaide's north-eastern suburbs and Near Hills Township since 2010. He is a member, sponsor or patron of a wide range of local community, sporting and service organisations in his electorate. Mr. Gardner was appointed Minister for Education after the March 2018 state election, having previously served as Shadow Minister in this portfolio since 2016. He is also the leader of government business in South Australian House of Assembly. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Gardner.
Thank you very much, Professor Abdullah, and it's a great pleasure to be here this morning at the opening of this important conference. I would like to begin by acknowledging, as others have, that we meet on the land of the Kaurna people and respect their ongoing spiritual relationship with the land, and thank you very much, Professor Rigney, for that welcome to country. We all appreciate it very much. It is an honour to be here today. I particularly want to welcome guests to South Australia. South Australia is a state that is extremely pleased to have conferences such as this. We have a very significant focus on education, and we also hope that you have a wonderful time while you're here and will enjoy coming back for future conferences and for leisure. I thank you all for coming together, for dedicating your time and expertise to the very important subject of providing the best possible education for the next generation of our children, for them to lead successful, happy and prosperous lives. For just over 2 years I was the Shadow Minister for Education, and as of the March election I've been given the great honour in South Australia to be able to have this important portfolio. It's a responsibility that I take very seriously. It is important, as we all know, because the important and direct connection between education, the future of our children and the future of this state here in South Australia, as it is in all of our jurisdictions. Here in South Australia, I just want to put in context the direction that the government is taking and give you a flavour of what we're doing. The Marshall South Australian government has a bold ambition for our state to indeed have the best education system and the best schools in the country, for every child in every classroom in this state to be supported to achieve their full potential. The only way to do that is through confident engagement with our schools, government schools and non-government schools. And we don't propose to encroach on the independence of non-government schools in doing so, but we are eager to engage in active partnerships to help all schools to achieve excellent quality and so that parents can have a faith in their choice for their children. Our schools must be innovative and flexible to engage each and every child, ensuring they develop confidence and skills that enable them to thrive and get ahead in life. We must encourage and support parents to actively participate in their child's learning and schooling. Positive engagement by parents and partnerships with schools can have a significant and positive effect on the child's learning and achievement at school. New professional development opportunities will be provided for teachers and other staff to ensure they're familiar with research and know how to put it into practice. And it was a real joy when we came into government to be able to share with the department our goal that when the government is developing new professional development opportunities, that isn't something that should only be available for our government schools, but something we would like to share with the non-government sector. In the classroom, of course, it's teachers that are the most important factor in a child's education while they're in the classroom. We need to recognise and encourage excellent teachers and give them the opportunity to upskill and grow as professionals, as this will ultimately benefit our children. Furthermore, we must make sure our schools reflect the richness of our community so that children from every group feel they belong, and this is a key role, certainly in the government sector, that we are trying to do. Children who feel they belong are engaged at school, they engage with their learning, they engage in their classwork and with their peers. So this is the direction of the new government here in South Australia. We are fortunate here in South Australia to have a number of outstanding Islamic schools, several of which I've been privileged over the last couple of years to engage with regularly, whether through visiting campuses, engaging and talking with school leaders, or indeed sharing iftar dinners, which I've had the pleasure of being invited to be involved with, and I thank those who have included me. The unambiguous policy of this government is to support a diversity of offerings in our education settings, reflecting the diversity of the community in this vibrant and multicultural state. We have strong communities representing cultures and languages from across the globe. Almost a quarter of the people of South Australia were born in a different country. And many of these communities, of course, have long histories here in South Australia. In Adelaide, we're fortunate to have the oldest surviving mosque in Australia, built in 1888 for Afghan Cameleers who helped open up the centre of this state. The name of our Adelaide to Darwin train service, the GAN, is a reminder of this contribution. And the history of this diversity is a strong foundation on which we will build the best schools in Australia. It is a diversity that we celebrate, and it is a history that we will remember. We're very privileged in South Australia to have, one of our newer partners in delivering that excellent education, the Centre for Islamic Thought and Education. Professor Abdullah and the team are well regarded around the world. This is understood in South Australia, where we celebrate the work that they are doing. The partnership that they have not only with the South Australian people and government, but particularly with the Islamic schools here in South Australia, as indeed around Australia and the world, is so critical, so that as we build the quality teaching and learning and pedagogy that we seek to have in all of our schools, that supports parents to be able to make choices reflecting their faith and their values and the absolute confidence that their children are going to get the best possible education. Every year, every month, every day, in every one of our settings, we each strive to do better. We each strive to support our children better. And SITE, as we know it, I don't know if that's what Professor Abdullah calls it, but we call it SITE, is a terrific partner in ensuring that in a number of our schools they'll be supported in that endeavour. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute pleasure to have shared some time with you this morning. I'm so grateful for the honour you've done me by inviting me to speak. I thank you for the work that you are doing for the children, not just here in South Australia obviously, but all around the world in all of our communities. I know that in the years ahead, the educators in our lives are the ones that we remember for our whole lives, and the impact that you have on so many children's education will never be forgotten. Thank you for your work, and I hope you enjoy the conference.
Thank you very much. The gifts that we give are local chocolates. You know, without chocolates, I'm not sure how we would ever survive. So, chocolates are always just the right gift to give. Just quickly, may I just draw your attention to those pictures on my right-hand side. They are portraits that speak about the history of Islam and Muslims in this country. And they are a loan from the Australian Islamic Museum, which is based in Melbourne. So when you do have a chance, please, we invite you to look at them, and we'll give you a very short snippet, if you wish, of the long-standing historical presence of Islam in this country. May I now call and introduce Mr. Nigel Relf, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor and President of the University of South Australia, to welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. And I can on the speaker's right to acknowledge that we meet today on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we honour and respect their relationship with the land. Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here to welcome you on behalf of the university and to follow on from Minister Gardner's speech. I would like to acknowledge the immense support we get from Minister Gardner and from the government. It's very nice to have a minister who has such a sophisticated view and understanding of the relationship between higher education, school education, and the other moving parts that help us to educate our young people. Although the Minister again forgot to mention that multi-million dollar funding agreement, I'm sure it's just about to come up. So welcome everybody. I'd like to start with a bit of history. In addition to my incredibly long job title in the university, I'm actually at heart a professional historian, and my particular interest is in, if I can put it this way, the interplay of cultures, and particularly cultures that are driven by religious belief. So my interest is a little bit older than some of the things we're talking about today, sort of from the 16th through the 18th century in Europe. But it is something that interests me, and what I know is that when it goes well, that interplay, it immeasurably enriches the way in which our societies can operate. And in an educational context, the ability we have to educate our children. Islam, of course, has a very ancient tradition, very sophisticated tradition of education, which has in many ways already enriched Western education. I remember Mohammed's inaugural lecture when he went through in interesting and illuminating detail the way in which Islamic science had influenced Western science thinking. So that happens too. We heard from Professor Rigney about the Aboriginal history of this country, and Aboriginal education also is very rich, has a very rich tradition. And my view is that we need to draw on all these traditions to strengthen what I guess I would call social cohesion, to prepare our young people for what is, as we can all see, an increasingly challenging world. And as I said before, when it goes right, it's great, it goes really well. When it goes badly, it goes very, very badly. And in my own period, of course, the things we're talking about took place against the backdrop of the 30 Years' War, which halved the population of Europe over the 30-year period. So we need to get it right. But today, you're here to talk about issues which will enable us to get it right. I'd very much like to congratulate SITE, as we do call it, that's right, in organising this conference and bringing together such a strong cohort of international representatives. And I'm particularly pleased to be here, I suppose, because I think the Centre for Islamic Education and Thought represents something that's very close to the heart of my university, the University of South Australia. We're a university, first of all, that seeks to address the big challenges of the world, and doing so by bringing to bear on them the very best in research and education, which SITE certainly does. All our research in the university is what I would call end-user focused, so we very much focus on how research can be applied. And all our degree programs are in various ways designed to prepare students for the world of work. Secondly, at the University of South Australia, we believe that really we can only do that by doing it as internationally as possible, by having as much international connectivity as we can. And that's something illustrated by our over 500 international research collaborations across 45 countries, our 2,500 global industry partners, and our 220,000 alumni across the world. And again, I think SITE exemplifies that very well. I think one of the things that Mohammed and his team has done very effectively since coming to UVSA is that international engagement. And SITE, I'd like to remind everybody, has only been in existence for 2 years. It came to us 2 years ago. And I would like to pay tribute to Professor Abdullah's leadership in bringing SITE here and leading it and growing it over the last few years. And also another colleague, Professor Stephen Dobson, the Dean of the School of Education. I think centres such as SITE only flourish when they're really embraced by the core big academic units of institutions like mine, and the School of Education has certainly embraced SITE. As one of the largest research concentrations in Islamic studies in Australia, SITE successfully collaborates with many academic partners, for example, the International Islamic University in Malaysia and the University of Qatar. It forges significant links with government, such as the Department of Human Services and the South Australian Correctional Service. Partners with non-government organisations, such as the Islamic Schools Association of Australia and Independent School of Victoria. In one of its many, many firsts, SITE has established Australia's first accredited Master of Teaching Secondary in Islamic Pedagogy and Maya, and a graduate certificate of graduate diploma in education in Islamic education. These postgraduate programs are unique in the English-speaking world, and they fill a much-needed gap. All the programs are offered online because we want to make sure they're fully accessible to as wide a range of students as we possibly can. And the Centre does so many other things, and yet there's more. The Centre currently leads an Islamic Schools Renewal project in collaboration with key national stakeholders. It heads the National Australian Islamic Schools curriculum in partnership with ISAA, the Australian National Imams Council, working with schools across Australia. And as I say, all this in just 2 years. Just think what they'll do in the next 10 years. So, once again, I welcome you. I'm very confident this conference will provide important insights into the future pedagogy in Islamic schooling in the West. I'm delighted that the University of South Australia has been able to play a part in making this conference happen. And I would like to finish by just acknowledging the contribution of a couple of people. These things don't just happen, you know, people have to actually organise them. And I'd like to thank Mila and Shazia, who I think have been at the heart of the organisation of what I'm sure is going to be a wonderful conference. I do hope you enjoy the conference. If you get a bit of time, do get out and about, international visitors, and have a look at this beautiful state of South Australia, which we call home. It's a wonderful place. Please enjoy the conference, and I look forward to seeing the outcomes and your deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Absolutely, I think we would not have been able to flourish as a centre, one, without the tremendous support that University of South Australia has given us and the leadership at the university. And also, if we weren't supported by Professor Stephen Dobson, the head and the Dean of the School of Education, I doubt we would have been able to achieve what we have achieved in the last 2 years. So thank you very much, both. Thanks to the University of South Australia and to all the wonderful colleagues we have at the university. May I call on Professor Stephen Dobson, the head and the Dean of the School of Education, to give his welcome, please. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I too would like to pay my respects to Professor Rigney, the Ghana people, their foremothers and forefathers past, present and those to come, and to all of you here today. Thank you so much for coming. As a dean, the most pleasurable thing is to be in a room full of so many people with so much skills, but also to represent so many different sectors and stakeholders. We have the Aboriginal people, we have the Catholic sector, we have the state sector, and we have, of course, all of our Islamic guests. This is wonderful, and this is exactly what the School of Education has been looking for, and we're so happy. So I'm going to ask a question. So what makes good Islamic pedagogy, and what makes good pedagogy? Now, there are many different versions of this, and I think that's what's so important here, that there are so many different people here today to discuss this. From my view, and from the university sector, we always talk about research and evidence, and I think that's important, but I do believe there's something else. It's that little piece of extra, call it experience. That's something which all of you who are very skilled teachers and school principals know. It's that, almost like that extra piece. It's very hard to measure, it's very hard to value, and for me it's about being able to have that kind of happy marriage between evidence and research and experience, and being able to bring those together. And I'm very happy to know that the next speakers, which Mohammed is going to introduce, that's been a key project for them for many years. So please consider this question and how to bring about that nice marriage. Have a great conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dobson. Excellent. And soon I'll be introducing the first two keynote speakers. Before doing so, allow me to just give a context to this conference and perhaps quickly summarize some of the aims and objectives. When Joseph Needham studied the history of science in China, he wanted to find out whether science was purely a product of the genius of Europe, or did all civilizations bring their contributions to the common pool? And by examining Chinese accomplishments per se, rather than Chinese failure vis-à-vis the West, he was able to show that environmental, social, and political bases were instrumental for the scientific revolution developing in the West and not in China. Now, with the contributions of scholars like Needham on the development of science and technology in China, the myth that science and technology were essentially European have been exploded. But also the history of science of the Islamic civilization has also been the focus of much research in the last few decades. In fact, recent studies in the history of science in the Islamic civilization have made significant contributions towards our understanding about Islam's contribution to the grand narrative of the history of science. Increasingly, in fact, contemporary scholarship on the history of Islamic science demonstrates that a substantial amount of genuine science was actually done in Islam, just like elsewhere. In fact, this predated similar discoveries in the West, and it also influenced the Renaissance. Islamic science was important for the rise of the Renaissance of the 12th century in Europe, and it also played an important part in the development of exact sciences during the Renaissance of the 16th century. Nevertheless, such contributions, whether of the Chinese civilization or the Islamic and indeed the indigenous original civilization, these were often ignored or dismissed, and in the case of the Islamic civilization, Orientalists proposed that Muslims were always more or less the faithful disciples of the Greeks, but were themselves destitute of all originality. Now, such views are a product of a typology which, based on a real specificity but detached from history, and thus conceived as intangible and essential. This typology ensures that European man from Greek antiquity onwards became the measure of all men everywhere, and accordingly, contributions of great civilizations like the Chinese and the Islamic and the indigenous were deliberately ignored or suppressed, and the view that they produced nothing original remained orthodox perhaps until the mid-20th century. Now, the danger of this representation, this typology, is that it undermines the often deep relation between cultures and indeed intellectual movements between cultures. The same can be said about the history of education and its origins and contributions. Now we are beginning to learn, for example, that the Islamic civilization had a wealth of wisdom, knowledge and experience in education and pedagogy specifically. We now know that between the 7th and the 9th century, for example, education was recognized by the Muslim community as, and I quote, a proper channel through which the universal and cohesive social order, in the way the Quran commanded, could be established. This resulted in a rapid increase for accessible and effective formal education at both primary and higher levels by the likes of Ghazali, Ibn Sahnun, Al-Jahil. Islamic theory of education and pedagogy specifically has gained scant attention in Western studies of Islam, and dare I say, among Muslims also. Although a small amount of educational text has been studied and published, we now have a clear idea, based on this small amount that we know of, we have a clear idea of the impressively long and continuous tradition of Islamic scholarship dealing with pedagogical and didactic issues, regardless of their authors' individual theological and judicial stances or ethnic origin or geographical affiliation. We also know that the social transfer of knowledge was subject to the scholarly interest of Muslims. We also know that Islamic education theory was influenced by Hellenistic heritage and also influenced Western theory of education. Among the texts dealing with Islamic education, for example, the genre called Adab al-Alim wal-Muta'allim, the etiquettes for teacher and learner, stands out, which explains and analyzes the objectives, ideals, and methods of teaching and learning including the ways in which teachers and students can act and behave, their moral character, and their relationship with one another in the educational process. Muslim scholars such as Al-Zarnuji of the 12th, 13th century, for example, emphasized, interestingly, that there should be a balance in all the dynamics of learning process to allow to keep up with the objectives of Islamic education, which is producing people of wisdom, of high ethical standards in the society. This is important, Al-Zarnuji argued, so that students can uphold morality in behavior as part of the learning process, while at the same time improving their cognitive abilities. But also we know that Muslim scholars developed original and creative pedagogical theories that could be applied to the culturally diverse context. They were, if you like, culturally responsive, and we will hear more about this from our keynote speakers. And they had appreciation of the logical reasoning, scientific responses to individual and societal needs, and yes, pluralism. Not so different, if you like, to paradigms of modern liberal democracies. Of course, we cannot expect to deduce from the past answers for all of our modern educational challenges. But we can at least begin to examine, interrogate, and possibly find solutions to some provocations, including the following. To what extent have pedagogical practices in Islamic schools been influenced by an Islamic theory of education? To what extent do pedagogical practices in Islamic schools reflect the aims and objectives of education as outlined in the works of people like Ghazali, Ibn Sahnun, Al-Jahil, Al-Zarnuji, and other contemporary scholars? To what extent, perhaps, has neoliberalism, which commodify public education by reducing learning to bits of information and skill to be taught and tested, influence pedagogical practices in Islamic schools? Have Islamic schools repeated the mistakes of Orientalism or fallen victims to an Orientalist discourse, which ignores and neglects theories, philosophies, and intellectual achievements originating from their own civilization? And can a synthesis of pedagogies be appropriate, and how? My friends, the conference, therefore, will critically explore pedagogy and Islamic schooling for Muslim learners from a whole of life and a whole of community perspective. The topics that will be addressed over the next 2 days and themes of presentations will include the following, but not limited to: conceptualizations of pedagogy in Islamic schools, pedagogy theory and practice, pedagogical leadership, politics and pedagogy, pedagogy identity and citizenship, critical pedagogical perspectives, culturally responsive pedagogy, professional learning communities, pedagogical conversations, pedagogy and implication, perhaps for curriculum and assessment, and so on. I am delighted to be hosting this conference, and I welcome you all with Ahlan wa Sahlan. May your coming to us make you part of the family. You are part of the family. That's what Ahlan means. It's more than just welcome. You are part of the family, and Sahlan. May your coming to us be plain and smooth, and make it a successful journey. My friends, I'm delighted that you're all here, and I hope that the next 2 days will be not only informative, critical, but also engaging and challenging. I hope also that we open our minds and hearts to see how best we can enhance our Islamic schools, for they are an aman, it's a trust that has been bestowed upon us, and we need to uphold this trust and this aman. Now, there are, I would say, no better people who could talk about these issues, challenges, explore the potentials of pedagogies other than the two following keynote speakers. the respected Professor Irabina Rigni, who you have already heard, he gave the welcome to country, and of course Professor Rob Hatton. They are both wonderful colleagues with whom we work, and we have benefited tremendously from their experience and cannot but express our heartfelt gratitude to their wonderful friendship and wonderful wisdom that we have shared and benefited from. I won't read their biodatas because they are extensive and they are there in your booklet. I invite you to do so yourself. But both gentlemen will be talking to us about toward a decolonizing Australian culturally responsive pedagogy. Please welcome them both. Thank you.